It's Tuesday, 11 a.m. So it's time for your Legacy Live. Coming back. This is I believe our third episode. So staying consistent and hoping you're enjoying these and getting some questions answered and learning a little bit about what you can do to take control of your life in certain circumstances and how you can make sure that your family stays out of court and conflict and is ready for any crisis in life. But not just that, but as you know, we'll also talk about business planning and exit planning and growing your business, increasing the value of your business. So some exciting things coming up. But today we're focusing on estate planning, and we're just going to kind of cover the basics because, again, this is the third episode. We're just ramping up here. Last time we talked a little bit about the definitions, how we're going to talk about legacy. What does a legacy mean? What is that for you? We talked about what a family is and how I'm going to use that word. Remember, it's a very general word. It's very inclusive. If you're single, you have a family. You have people you care about, people who are close to you. And also all the renditions and ways that family can be viewed in our lives. We talked a little bit about what estate planning is, but today we're going to get a little more into that. We're not going to cover maybe the specifics of estate planning. Unless you have questions, go ahead and post them in the comments, and I'll answer those questions as they come up. But at first, I'll kind of do a little bit of just an overview, and hopefully maybe that'll bring some questions up to you that you can put in comments and I can answer now. Or if you come here after the show's over, you can jump in and go and ask those questions, and I'll get back to you, no matter what platform you're on. If you're over on LinkedIn, if you're over in Facebook or on YouTube, we'll get to you. All right. Okay, fantastic. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in and get rolling. Okay, so estate planning. What is estate planning? Who needs it? Why you need it? And kind of those general things, right? I know a lot of times when we think about estate planning, most people think about who gets what when you die, right? But it's more than that. It covers a lot of contingencies beyond just who gets what when you die. It also talks about and answers questions such as, what happens if you become incapacitated? What if you're sick? I know that's been a big concern lately with COVID. We're kind of talking about this right now where there seems to be some spikes happening and people are just kind of curious as to, well, who can make medical decisions for you? And you may have seen that in your own life as family members have become ill and not able to make decisions for themselves. So that can happen either because you're unconscious in the hospital or you've become incapacitated, or maybe a loved one's disabled and doesn't have the legal authority to make decisions for themselves. So a doctor needs to rely on someone else to give them guidance for what you want. So it's making sure that when those things need to happen, that your decisions are getting made, right? Your will and your desires and wishes as to your health care, that those are the guiding principles going towards making the decisions for your care. Also, it deals with, well, if you're incapacitated and you have bills that need to be paid to make sure your home doesn't get foreclosed on, or make sure your lights don't get turned off. So when you get home out of the hospital or wherever you're at, that those things are up and running still. Okay. So it has to do with giving someone authority to make those decisions, to be able to pay your bills for you and to work with the bank. Banks are, thankfully, they're very concerned and very careful with who accesses your money, right? It should be that way. So we want to make sure that the banks know that you've made a decision as to who's going to be making those decisions for you and who's going to be making those actions for you. And so they can feel comfortable working with that person. Also, we want to make sure that in your estate plan, it also covers guardianship. Okay. So if you have minors at home, we know minors until they're 18, people generally can't care for themselves, right? They can't enter into contracts. They can't have utility bills. They can't rent, right? They can't buy things. So until they're 18, they can't own a lot of money. So it just comes down to making sure that someone is there to take care of them in those instances, right? We want to make sure that the right person, someone you know and trust, someone the kids know and trust, are caring for them on a long-term basis, but also on a short-term basis. This is something that I love doing. This is a big part of why I love being involved in the estate planning process and working with families on an ongoing basis to maintain these estate plans. It's because I have a lot of children. You may know, maybe you don't know, but I have 7 children, and they're all ages right now, from 20 down to 3, right? So we still have quite a few kids who are at home, and if my wife and I, if we weren't able to care for them, we'd want to make sure that they are being cared for by someone who has the same guiding principles that we hold, right? To have the same spiritual and when it comes to handling money and financial principles, and can guide the kids and let them do the things they want to do, and to help them grow in their talents and skills, right? So we want to make sure that someone is there in the long term to take care of them the way that we'd want them to be taken care of, but also in the emergent situation, the short-term situation. This is something that's not handled by traditional planning. Okay, so if you've worked with a lawyer in the past, or you're working with one now to get your estate plan in place, make sure that you are dealing with that temporary situation. What I mean by that is, who is going to care for the kids on the night that something happens to you and your spouse, right? If you're a single parent, what if something happens to you? What is going to be the kids' experience that night? Okay, we want to make sure that these plans are outcome-based. The documents, sure, they're important, but that is not the value of an estate plan, okay? The documents solely reflect and implement the plan, okay? What's important is that you're working with someone or that understands how to focus on the outcome, okay? That when your plan is designed, when you've thought through it, that you're talking about the big what if situations, and you're creating and thinking about, what is the experience my spouse is going to have if I become incapacitated or pass away? What is the experience my kids are going to have if I become, or we both become incapacitated or pass away? What is that experience going to be like for them? And then you use those tools, those documents. We'll talk about these documents probably more thoroughly individually in later episodes. But, we're talking wills, trusts, power of attorneys, guardianship, nominations, right? So those are like the legal documents, right? That a lot of times people think that is their plan, right? Again, those are tools. Those are tools to accomplish the plan. The plan is much more than that, right? The plan encompasses your hopes, your dreams, and your expectations, okay? And the document should reflect that. Okay. So again, if your kids need to be with someone overnight, if I think about, Jane and I, my wife and I, if we got in a car accident, coming home from a date, from a movie or something, what would happen to the kids that night? What is that experience going to be for them? Is the state going to get involved? Are they going to be with strangers for a couple days until things get sorted out? Or do we have a plan in place? Have we asked and communicated with local friends, neighbors, family who live close by? Communicate with them our wishes that they step in and help our kids. Have we empowered them, again, with legal tools to be able to perform those duties of taking care of them? If when the kids, falls on their bike and needs stitches while they're in the care of this temporary guardian, can that guardian take them to urgent care and get them the help they need? Will the urgent care work with them? Making sure that the right tools are in place to give the urgent care comfort and understanding that they can rely on helping this temporary guardian, your friend, neighbor, who's caring for your kids, to make decisions for the kids in that short period of time that you're not with them. So those are important things. Those are, again, estate plan. It's more than just who gets what when you pass away. It does cover that, of course. It does incorporate how are your assets distributed, and how are they used after you pass away, okay? And the neat thing, we'll talk about this later, neat thing is again, we can create an outcome. You can create and take control of these things in a lot more than just a divide and distribute circumstance, right? Your decisions aren't limited to splitting up all your assets evenly amongst the people and dumping the money on them, right? Distribute the money to them. You can have a plan that goes beyond that. You can have a plan that really incorporates some guidance for your heirs, especially if they're young still, if they're in their 20s or if they're minor still. Let's build in some guidance for them, and maybe a mentor like a trustee or someone who can be there to guide them and help them become more financially mature as they move into receiving these assets and this money you left behind for them. And so they can kind of continue to mature in that, and they're not just money's not just dumped on them later in life when you pass away. Again, like I said, we'll get more into specifics on how you do that and what tools you use to do that. Or you can jump over. We've got on our YouTube channel, which also streams through to our website. We've got some facts, right? Frequently asked question videos that kind of dive in a little bit into each of these different things. You want to know what a will is, a trust is, you can jump over there and get a little bit of guidance. But again, we'll talk more thoroughly about those in another episode here in Your Legacy Life. But again, we want this plan to be comprehensive. Your estate plan, oftentimes people ask me, well, when should I put an estate plan in place? And to be honest, a lot of attorneys or a lot of advisors might say, might talk about a threshold, an asset value threshold, or they might talk about certain life events, right? A lot of times it's centered around, people think the dollar sign, right? How much money do you have? Do I have enough money to need an estate plan? And to be honest, I don't like focusing on that. I like to focus again on the experience and outcome. What is the experience and outcome going to be for your children or you, whether your children are minors or adults, or your spouse, if you're married or single or have a life partner? What is the experience going to be for all of these people? And so really learning what is going to happen under your current circumstances is very highly valuable, right? It's a valuable thing to sit down with someone or do some research. I don't recommend doing research on your own, but you can do some, right? There's a lot of information out there. Find out, if you don't have a plan in place, what is that experience going to be for your spouse, your life partner, or your children, depending upon their age and circumstance and your family dynamics and your asset levels, assets you have. What is that experience going to be for them? What is that outcome going to be for them? One thing that you'll find out that you might be surprised about if you're married is that the government doesn't necessarily think you trust your spouse, okay? So what I mean by that is that your spouse doesn't have this trump card as the default decision maker for your financial accounts and financial situation, your finances, or your medical decisions. Okay, oftentimes they're on the level playing field with your parents, other family members, and things like that. Their parents, I should say, and such. Right. So finding those things out and seeing if what the experience would be today for them if something happened to you is in alignment with what you want to see and what you would expect to see happen. And if it's not, take control, make it happen, because you can. All right. I know a lot of people think about the legal system as being this system that enables people to get a hold of other people's assets, right? Through lawsuits, through just being married and being divorced, or all these different situations that the legal system is there to take your money from you, enable people to take your stuff from you. But you know what? It's that same system that has also built in the capacity for you to take control, to make sure and to build that outcome, and to stop people from being able to access your money, to direct the courts on what decisions to make, or to keep the courts out of it altogether. Okay, you can plan to the point to where in most situations, you can just keep the court out of your life and keep your court out of your family's life, okay, through proper planning. And if someone does try to get the court involved, you can put contingencies in there and terms in the plan to discourage that, or to punish the person. I mean, to be blatant, to punish them for bringing that up if they end up losing that challenge, okay? So there's deterrence you can build in, and there's other things you can build in. But really, we want to focus on the positives, right? We want to focus on how can you make sure everything goes smoothly, that no one has to deal with the court to get permission to manage your finances for you or to make medical decisions for you, right? There's enough going on in these times of crises and car accidents and death and incapacity and illness. Let's not make, the question about who's going to pay your bills for you in the meantime another obstacle and another point of contention and another reason to fight and another reason to stress, okay? Because it doesn't have to be. And that's what estate planning is all about. Legacy planning is all about taking that control, giving a roadmap to your family so that they can just follow it. Someone can step in. They've already been educated ahead of time what your wishes are, and they want to be there for you. And they've said, yeah, I can do this for you if you need it. And you've said, great, here's everything you need to know and everything that you need to be able to step in without any delay, without any court involvement, and just move forward and making sure that as much peace of mind is available in these difficult situations. Okay, so that's kind of the basics there I wanted to cover. I don't know if anybody has any questions. Again, go ahead and ask them, but just if you do have any questions, obviously, you can feel free to reach out to me. You can DM me, you can reach out, call me, email me. All my access, all my information's there. If you're on one of these social accounts, go ahead and reach out. I'm here to help, and I want to give you as much information as you need and guidance to be able to put these things in place for you and make the right decisions for your family. But I think, in the next week when we get together, I really kind of want to focus on the business side. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, because one thing to realize when it comes to estate planning is that for business owners, their business is usually their biggest asset. That reminds me, I'm gonna backtrack here because I got a little distracted. I remember something I brought up, and I'm gonna go back to it. So let's put a pin on this whole business thing that I was just talking about. Let's talk a little bit about that question: is when should you do an estate plan? I said a lot of people focus on the money, but I like to focus on the outcome. So there are some trigger points that I'll go ahead and give you that I think are important, and because apply to a lot of people to just show you how broad this estate planning process is, and how many people it incorporates, and how everybody really needs it. And so some really big trigger points that I often tell people is like, look, if you are married, as soon as you get married, you should be thinking about an estate plan. Okay. As soon as you turn 18, or as soon as you have a child who turns 18, they should do some planning, particularly putting in place financial and medical power of attorneys to enable you as their parents to make decisions for them continuing, right? So I've had 2 kids turn 18 so far. All right. And so I know the day they wake up on that birthday morning, they're 18, the world thinks they're an adult. The government says they're an adult and they can make their own decisions, and their parents no longer have full control over their destiny, right? And decisions. Well, but as parents, we know that that's a little presumptuous, okay? They still need guidance and they still need help. So as soon as they turn 18, make sure to, get them, especially if they're going away to college, get a power of attorney in place for their financial and their medical decisions, so they can empower you or someone close to them to help them in case they get in trouble, in case they need some assistance, in case they get sick or injured, that those things are in place, okay? Other life events. You have a baby. As soon as you have a child, you want to make sure that there's a plan in place for that child in case something happens to you, okay? And then you buy a home. There's 12 ways in most states to own real estate, and they all have their plus or minuses, okay? Some of them avoid probate process if something happens to you. Some of them don't, okay? Some of them do enable and create that experience you want to see happen to your home or other investment real estate properties if something happens to you. Some of them don't. What I'm talking about here is like, having your deed to your home or real estate, talk about like, the different terms you might hear is like joint tenant with right of survivorship, tenants in common, right? Community property, holding it in trust, holding it in an LLC. So there's dozens of ways. There's lots of different ways to hold and own real estate, and they each have their quirks, okay? And some may be in alignment with your wishes and some may not be. So as soon as you buy real estate, you should be looking at how is that real estate going to benefit your family and work with your family in the case of your incapacity or death. Or in the case of lawsuits, right? Do you want to protect that asset? Is it an investment property? And you want to make sure that if your tenant slips and falls and gets hurt on that property, that they can only sue that property and they can't sue you individually, right? So there we can talk about some liability shielding through business entities, LLCs. Maybe that's the right way to hold real estate. So these are different life events, as soon as you retire, and things like that. So, and once these estate planning plans are in place, they are not a one and done situation. Just by what I just said now, right? As far as those triggering events for putting a plan in place, you might, maybe when you put your plan in place, you were just newly married. Now you've got children. Now you own a home. Now when your children's turning 18, now you're retiring, you're an empty nester, your children are adults. All these different things will create a new dynamic. And the plan that was working, that was creating that optimal experience for everybody involved when the kids were minors, might not do and create the right experience after you're an empty nester and they're gone and you're retired, right? So that's why you want to make sure that these are in place. If you can, I highly suggest when you do work with someone to put an estate plan in place, that you work with someone who is going to take a proactive role to maintaining your estate plan. Anytime I work with a family, I commit to the family that I'll be there for them, I'll answer any emails or phone calls and questions for them regarding their plan, without any future billing. I'm not going to bill them for that, right? I've helped them create their plan. They've paid me to help them create their plan. I'm going to support that plan for them. When they, every 3 years, I'm going to reach out and we're going to sit down, see what's happened, see what's changed in the law, see what's changed in their family, see what's changed in their finances and assets. Make sure that the plan we put in place 3 years ago, or the last time we reviewed it, is still working with their new dynamics. Okay. If it isn't, then we'll make some adjustments, sure, there might be some nominal fees for that, but, we're going to make those adjustments and we're going to help them maintain that. Okay. So those are some things I'd encourage. Those are some basic questions a lot of people have. A lot of people ask, where to start. I would highly recommend just reaching out to someone who does estate planning and sitting down and having a consultation with them. I provide, first meeting I have with clients, I call a family wealth planning session. Okay, we sit down and we spend 2 hours digging into these big what ifs and looking at their family dynamics, looking at their financial dynamics, and talking about what are their hopes and dreams for their family in case of these different crises. Through that process, they're kind of educated on, well, if they have a current plan, we're talking about these what ifs in context of their current plan. If they don't have a plan, we're talking about their these experiences and these crises and these big what ifs in life, incapacity, death, illness. We're talking about those things in the context of having no plan. Because if you don't have a plan, the government's put one in place for you. Okay, legislature's been nice enough to write a default plan for you, but I have yet to come across many people where that default plan is optimal. So getting educated, finding out, is the plan that's currently in place for you, state default, your plan you put together recently or 10 years ago, if it's still creating that experience for your loved ones that you want to see happen. And if not, what can you do to update that and to put a plan in place that is currently working and to continue to keep that updated on an ongoing basis? Okay. So I think that's great. We've spent almost a half hour here together. Again, as questions come up, post them in the comments, wherever you're at, wherever you're watching this, and we'll get to you. And then we'll talk next week. I want to visit a little bit about the business side of and how it interacts with estate planning. Okay. Because I know I have a lot of friends and family and contacts here who in my network who are business owners. And I want to make sure that they understand a little bit, how does an estate plan work with their business? Because their business, most business owners, their 80% of their net worth is their business. It's like most of them are counting on their business for their retirement or to take care of their family after they're gone, right? So how can we make sure that the contingencies are taken care of in their business? That's what I want to kind of talk the basics of next week. So that's what we'll get into, talk a little bit about that, and then that will build us into being able to talk more further about the specific tools of estate planning and legacy planning, as I like to call it, because like I said, I think it's broader than just the things you own and who's going to get them when you pass away. Legacy planning, I think, is a lot more centered around and kind of is more accurate and really incorporates that expectation, that experience, and that outcome for your family and loved ones. And also, it deals with planning for life, right? We want to make sure that you have what you need now, that your financial situation is where you want it, and now and when you retire. We also want to make sure that if you do have a transfer of assets to the next generation, what can you do today with your family to kind of prepare them for receiving that legacy, right? We don't want to just dump money on them like, whoa, wait, I got a couple $100,000 from mom and dad and I'm 25, I can quit school. We don't want that. We want these assets that we provide for them at the case of our death, or maybe we give to them before we die because that's what we want to help them. That these things aren't a hindrance to them and aren't a point of confusion, but that they are enabling for them, right? If you want your family to take over, your kids to take over your business, if you want your kids to inherit your wealth when you pass away, let's make sure that inheritance, or if you want to give it to them before you pass away, right? That it sets them up for success, that they're ready to receive it, and they receive it in a way that kind of lights the fire for their future, right? There's an attorney up in Utah that likes to talk about like kindling, right? I love it. He's really good at describing this and how your inheritance, what you leave your kids, whether small or big, it can be kindling for them. It can help them to kind of light the fire for their future if it's done in the right way. One, if you've prepared them during life, which we'll talk about some really neat ways to do that. How to communicate with them as a family and how to work together as a family to prepare them for that, whether they're already adults or they're young. I'm going to give you some of those tools and things you can implement in your family. Also, I want to talk about, we want to make sure that, again, that it kind of prepares, that they're prepared, and when they receive it, they know how to use it, right? And they can use it in a way that works for them, that we're not railroading them in where we think the best path is for them, that we're helping them make good decisions to create the path that's best for them, right? If you're college educated, you might think that's the best path, but it might not be for your kids, and that's okay, right? So we want to make sure that they are making good decisions, that they're receiving these guiding principles that are important to your family. One, that you've established what are the guiding principles that are important to your family, and two, that you've implemented, family mission statements and family discussions around these things, so you can kind of guide them through that and they understand what this is and what it means to receive a legacy. But they can choose that path, and that path will help them move forward. And what you are able to provide to them after you've passed, or as gifts before while you're alive, that those things aren't a stumbling block or point of confusion along that path, that it's actually, like I said, kind of that kindling, as that attorney up in Salt Lake says, it helps them to ignite that path and accelerate along that path, and it enables their plans. So those are some things we'll talk about. Again, next week, look forward to seeing you again. We'll talk about business and how businesses are generally and the basic form. We're not going to get to a lot of details. We'll get into details in future episodes. But generally, kind of like we talked about today with the basics of estate planning, we'll talk about the basics of business planning in regards to estate planning and exit planning. Okay? All right. So look forward to seeing you next week, and hope you got a lot out of this. If you did, please leave a review on wherever you're at. Like, subscribe, share it with friends you think can benefit from it, and talk to you soon.